The photos didn't show maybe. They showed my wife choosing someone else like it was routine, and in that moment my marriage stopped being a question. My name is Ethan Parker. I'm not special, just a working American man who thought he did the basics right. I showed up, paid bills, fixed what broke, stayed loyal when life got boring. I thought that counted for something. Lauren and I used to feel like a team. Then it started dying in quiet, everyday ways, the kind nobody warns you about because it doesn't look like a crisis. She came home later and later, always with a tidy excuse already packaged. Her warmth went missing like it got left behind somewhere. Conversations turned into logistics. The house felt like a shared rental with two adults moving around each other politely. At first, I did what most guys do. I blamed everything except the one thing sitting in the middle of the room. Stress. Work pressure. A phase. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe I wasn't giving her enough attention. Maybe I was just tired and reading the room wrong. I told myself that because it was easier than admitting the truth might be uglier. But my instincts didn't quiet down. They got louder. The pattern tightened. If you're paying attention, you can feel when someone's life has a second door you don't have a key to. One night, I stood in our kitchen with the lights off and realized something simple. I wasn't sleeping because I didn't trust the story I was being fed. And if I didn't trust my wife, then I didn't have a marriage. I had a performance. So I made a decision I never thought I'd make. I hired someone, not because I wanted drama, because I wanted certainty. I wanted reality, even if it hurt, because the limbo was eating me alive. The investigator didn't ask for my feelings. He asked for details, schedule, locations, names I'd heard, if any. He treated it like a job. That alone should have told me where I was. 3 days later, an email hit my phone while I was sitting in my truck outside a job site. The subject line was clean and professional, like this was a dentist appointment. Case update. Attached. I didn't open it right away. I stared at it like it might bite. My hands were steady, but my chest felt tight, like my body knew what my mind was still trying to bargain with. Then I tapped the attachment. The first photo was Lauren outside a restaurant I recognized. She wasn't alone. A man stood close enough that their shoulders touched without effort, like they'd done it 100 times. Her face wasn't guarded. She was smiling, real smile, not the polite one she gave me lately. His hand rested low on her back like it belonged there. The next photo made it worse because it removed all doubt. They weren't just talking. They were touching in that comfortable way people do when they don't think anyone's watching. Intimate. Familiar. Not a mistake. Not a misunderstanding. A choice. I scrolled through the set like I was checking the weather. Each image was another nail. Different timestamps. Different angles. Pattern, not an incident. There are moments in a man's life where something inside him stops asking and starts recording. This was one of those moments. My stomach didn't flip. I didn't shake. I didn't cry. I just felt a hard, clean drop, like an elevator cable snapping. Because the second you see proof that clear, it stops being about suspicion. It becomes about damage. I locked my phone. I sat there in silence with the engine off. And I understood something I hadn't let myself say out loud yet. Lauren didn't drift. She left while still sleeping under my roof. And now that I knew, I wasn't going to waste another second acting like I didn't. I didn't drive home and kick the door open. I didn't rehearse speeches in my head like some guy begging to be heard. That's what she would have expected, me storming in, her crying, the whole thing turning into noise. Noise gives people room to twist the story. Noise creates misunderstandings. Noise buys time. I wasn't giving her time. I sat in my truck with the photos still fresh behind my eyes and did the one thing that felt honest. I went straight to the source she thought was safe. The investigator's notes had a name. Derek Sullivan. A number 2. Pulled from the same kind of careful work that turns secrets into facts. I stared at it for a second. Not because I was scared. Because I knew once I hit the call, there was no back. I pressed it anyway. It rang twice. Then, hello. A man's voice. Casual. Like he'd earned the right to answer. I didn't introduce myself with anger. I didn't raise my voice. I kept it steady, The way you keep your voice when you're talking to someone who doesn't matter. Derek Sullivan? Silence. A faint shift, like he'd stopped moving. Like a TV got muted in the background. I could hear breathing, more than one person close enough to share air. That detail hit harder than the photos, because it told me what kind of moment I'd walked into. Yeah, he said, slower now. Who is this? I didn't give him the courtesy of a conversation. I wasn't calling to ask questions. I already had answers. This is Ethan Parker, I said. Lauren's husband. The silence on the other end went heavy. Not confusion. Recognition. Like he'd known this day existed and just hoped it wouldn't arrive. He didn't deny her name. He didn't say, "What are you talking about?" He just stopped being confident. I let that hang for half a second. Long enough for him to understand that I wasn't guessing. Long enough for whatever was happening on his side to freeze in place. Then I said the only thing that mattered. Tell her I'm filing for divorce. He cleared his throat like that would change reality. Look, man. No. I cut in, calm as a blade. Don't talk. Listen. Another pause. I could picture it without trying. Him standing there, phone in hand, trying to decide if he should play tough or play innocent. Guys like that always think there's a right move. Like life is a game if you pick the correct line. I didn't give him any lines to pick from. This isn't a discussion, I said. You don't get a vote. You don't get an explanation. You're not important enough for either. My voice didn't crack. It didn't heat up. If anything, it got colder because pain is loud when it's fresh, but once it turns into a decision, it quiets down. He tried again, weaker. Ethan, I didn't let him finish. Not because I couldn't handle it, because it didn't matter. I'd heard enough lies in my own house. I wasn't collecting more from a stranger. Tell her, I repeated. I'm done. Then I hung up. No threats, no yelling, no dragging it out. Just a clean end, delivered straight into the room where they thought they were safe. I sat there after, phone in my hand, staring through the windshield at nothing. And I realized the strange part wasn't the anger. The strange part was how simple it felt. Love didn't explode. It didn't beg for a second chance. It didn't fight for dignity. It just died, quiet and final, because nothing either of them could say would change what I'd already seen. I didn't go to that party to see what happens. I went because I'd already decided I wasn't living in uncertainty anymore. It was at a mutual friend's house. One of those loud, crowded get-togethers people throw to prove they still have a social life. Music too high, lights too bright, laughter spilling everywhere like nobody in the room had ever been hurt by anything. I pulled up and sat in my truck for a minute before I went in. Not to hype myself up, to lock in the mindset. Calm, controlled, purpose. That's what I carried with me when I walked to the door. No shaking hands, no tunnel vision. Just that steady pressure in my chest. The kind that doesn't beg to be released. It just waits. Lauren didn't know I'd be there. I didn't text her. Didn't call. Didn't ask if she was coming. I wasn't showing up to argue or compete for attention. I wasn't there to win her back. I was there to look at my marriage the way it really was. Out in the open with no filters, no closed doors, no private excuses. Inside, people smiled like they were trained for it. Couples leaned into each other. Someone slapped my shoulder and said my name like we were all still on the same page. I nodded, kept moving. The small talk bounced off me, because my goal wasn't complicated. Find her, confirm what I already knew, end the illusion in the same place it had been thriving, around people who thought they were just watching fun. I moved through the room like I belonged there because I did. That was the sick part. This was our circle, our friends, our familiar faces. The same people who'd ask us how married life was going, like it was a shared joke. I didn't scan frantically. I didn't look like a man hunting. I looked like a man arriving. Every laugh I heard made me feel more detached. Not because I hated the noise, because the noise reminded me how easy it is for betrayal to hide inside normal life. All this brightness, and nobody sees the dark corner where someone's life is getting cut in half. I checked the kitchen, then the hallway, then the back patio through a sliding door where a few people were smoking and talking too close. Still nothing. Good. Because the longer it took, the more certain I became that I was right. When your wife is missing at a party she said she'd be at, she's usually exactly where you don't want to find her. I didn't announce myself. Didn't ask anyone, have you seen Lauren? Like some worried husband. I wasn't worried. I was focused. That's the difference between a man who still hopes and a man who's done. And when I finally spotted the direction of her laughter, lighter than it had been at home in months, I knew this night was going to end one way. Not with a fight, with a finish. I found them near the back of the house where the music softened and people stopped paying attention to anyone except themselves. Lauren was standing beside him like it was natural, like it was normal, like she hadn't left me at home for months with a wife-shaped shadow and a house full of silence. Derek. He was taller than I expected, not in a way that mattered, just enough to make him look comfortable taking up space. His posture said he'd never had to earn anything the hard way. Clean shirt, easy grin, the kind of guy who floats through life on charm and borrowed confidence. Lauren laughed at something he said and touched his arm with that casual ease people have when they're not afraid. Not a quick, guilty tap. A relaxed, familiar touch, like her hand belonged there. And that's what hit me hardest. Not the fact that she was with him. The absence of shame. No checking the room. No stiff posture. No what if someone sees. She looked free. He looked proud. Two people living inside the lie like consequences were something that happened to other people. Time slows down the way it does when you're watching something you can't unsee. Her smile. The angle of her body toward him. The way she leaned in to hear him better even though the music wasn't that loud. The way he stood close enough to claim her without saying it out loud. I watched for maybe 5 seconds, maybe 20. It didn't matter. The truth was already complete. There's a specific kind of anger that doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need to prove itself. It tightens, sharpens, becomes useful. That's what happened inside me. I didn't feel like a confused husband anymore. I didn't feel like a man asking for honesty. I felt like someone who'd been given final confirmation that the thing he was protecting didn't exist. Lauren had been living a second life in public while I stayed home trying to be patient, trying to be reasonable, trying to be the steady one. Standing there watching her laugh with him, I realized something clean and ugly. She wasn't lost. She wasn't going through something. She was choosing this. And people around them, friends, strangers, whoever, kept talking and sipping drinks like nothing was happening. Like betrayal is only real when it's loud enough for the room to notice. I took one slow breath and felt the last layer of hesitation burn off. This wasn't going to be a scene. It was going to be an ending. I started walking toward them, steady and direct, and the closer I got, the more obvious it became. Neither of them had any idea what was about to hit them. That was fine. They'd had months. I was only taking a minute. I didn't rush. I didn't stomp. I didn't throw my weight around like some cartoon of a jealous husband. I walked up like I belonged there, because I did. Lauren noticed me first. Her eyes lifted, and for half a second her face stayed in that party smile. Then it drained out of her like someone pulled a plug. Her mouth opened slightly, like her brain needed a second to catch up to what her eyes were seeing. Derek turned a beat later. He looked me over fast, trying to measure me in one glance. That kind of guy always thinks the moment is going to be about dominance. Like this is a bar fight and not a life coming apart. I stopped right in front of them, close enough that Lauren could smell me, close enough that Derek couldn't pretend I was overreacting from across the room. My voice didn't shake. It didn't rise. "I'm getting a divorce," I said. Simple, clean, no extra words to argue with. Lauren blinked hard like she could reset reality. "Ethan, what are you doing here?" Even then, she tried to turn it into confusion instead of accountability. Like the problem was my presence, not her choices. Derek's smile disappeared completely. His jaw tightened, then loosened, like he wasn't sure which mask to wear. His eyes flicked around, checking the room, checking who might be watching. People were watching, not staring openly, but the energy shifted. The nearby conversations thinned out. A couple of heads turned like antennas picking up a new frequency. Lauren took a small step toward me, hands half raised like she was reaching for something she could still control. "Can we talk?" "Not here." I held my position, still, calm. No, I said. One word, and it landed heavier than any shouting ever could. Her throat worked. Please, just, what is this? What did you hear? That was the move. If she could make it about hearing, she could turn it into gossip. Miscommunication, insecurity, something soft, something fixable. I didn't give her that room. It's done, I said. I'm not here to argue. I'm not here to hear explanations. I'm telling you. The silence between us thickened. Lauren's eyes were wet now, but she wasn't crying yet. She was panicking, trying to find the right emotion to change the outcome. Derek finally spoke, cautious. Man, you should calm down. I looked at him like he'd just volunteered to carry a heavy box. I am calm, I said. That's the point. His mouth shut. He shifted his weight like he wanted to step back but didn't want to look scared in front of her. Lauren's voice got smaller. Ethan, please. Not like this. I watched her face. The same face that used to soften when she saw me come home. The same face that had turned flat and distant for months. Now it was full of urgency because the consequences were finally standing in front of her. I didn't feel satisfied. I didn't feel triumph. I felt clarity. This is exactly like this, I said. You didn't care how it was when you were doing it. That's when it happened, the moment the fun collapsed. The little bubble around them popped. The ease drained out of the air. The party didn't stop, but in our corner of the room, it might as well have. Lauren stood frozen between pleading and shock. Derek looked like a man realizing he'd stepped into something he never planned to own. And me? I stood there steady because I wasn't fighting for us. I was stepping out of the wreckage. She did exactly what I expected once the room stopped being safe. It's not what you think, Lauren said, fast, too fast, like the words had been sitting behind her teeth for months, waiting for the day she'd need them. I didn't react. I just looked at her. Ethan, please let me explain. I made a mistake. Mistake. That word is for dropping a glass, taking a wrong exit, sending a text to the wrong person. Not this. She stepped closer, eyes shining now, and reached like she could grab my sleeve and pull me back into the version of me that still hoped. Her hand hovered near my arm. I didn't move away dramatically. I didn't flinch. I stayed still, because the truth was, her words were already dead. They didn't reach me. They didn't even sound like my language anymore. When trust is gone, apologies turn into noise, familiar sounds with no meaning. Please, she said again, voice cracking. Just come with me. Let's talk somewhere else. Behind her, Derek shifted like he wished he could melt into the wall. His eyes kept sliding away, scanning for exits, scanning for anyone who might be looking at him too hard. He wasn't angry. He wasn't brave. He was uncomfortable. That detail mattered to me more than it should have, because it showed me the core truth. He never planned to carry consequences with her. He planned to borrow her and walk away clean. Lauren's tears finally spilled. She tried to soften her face into something helpless. She tried to turn herself into a victim of circumstance instead of the author of it. You don't understand, she said. It's been complicated. I've been confused. We've been distant. There it was. The pivot. If she could make it about us, then she could spread the blame around like it was shared weight. Like loyalty is optional when things feel hard. I watched her talk and realized I wasn't angry the way I'd imagined I'd be. I wasn't even hurt in the active sense. I felt something worse. Numb. That emotional shutdown people don't understand until they hit it. It's not peaceful. It's the absence of needing anything from the person standing in front of you. Once you hit that emptiness, nothing can be negotiated anymore. She saw it on my face. That's when her panic deepened, because she understood the real problem wasn't Derek. It was that I was gone. Derek finally muttered, Lauren, maybe we should. He stopped because he didn't know what to say that wouldn't make him look exactly like what he was. Lauren turned on him for half a second, just a flash of anger, then snapped back to me, trying to pull me back with her eyes. Ethan, don't do this, she whispered, like the decision was happening to her. I held her gaze. I'm not doing anything, I said. You already did it. She shook her head, tears falling harder. Please. I love you. I didn't argue with that. I didn't laugh. I didn't correct her. I just let it sit there, empty, because the listener was gone. And without the listener, the words didn't matter. We didn't resolve it at the party. There was nothing to resolve. I left first, not storming out, just walking away like my legs belonged to me again. Lauren followed a few steps behind, whispering my name like it was a rope she could still throw around my waist. By the time we got home, the house felt exactly like it had for weeks. Quiet, staged, wrong. The only difference was that now the lie had a face. She started talking the second the door shut. Ethan, listen, please. You don't know what you saw. It's not. I walked past her into the dining room, pulled out a chair, sat down, calm, like I was about to go over paperwork. Because that's what this was now. I opened my phone and set it on the table between us. Then I took out the printed packet the investigator had dropped off earlier, dates, times, places, photos. I didn't slam it down. I placed it neatly like evidence in a file. Lauren's voice faltered. What is that? Reality, I said. She stepped closer, slow now. The confidence she'd brought home, the hope she could talk her way out, started leaking out of her. She looked at the first page and froze. I watched her eyes move over the details. Her breathing changed, quickened, the way it does when someone realizes the room is locked. There's a difference between being accused and being documented. Accusations are emotional. They can be framed as jealousy, insecurity, a man losing his grip. Documentation is cold. It doesn't care about her tone or her tears. It doesn't shift based on who tells the story better. This is insane, she whispered. But her voice didn't have anger in it. It had scary. I swiped to the photos and pushed the phone slightly closer. Not aggressively, just enough. There she was. Again, and again, and again. Different clothes, different days, same pattern. Her mouth opened like she wanted to deny it, but her brain couldn't find a route. You could see her trying anyway, trying to locate a gap in the timeline, a blurry angle, a loophole. There wasn't one. I didn't show her the evidence to humiliate her. I didn't care about humiliating her. I showed it to remove every escape route she might use later. Every, that's not what happened. Every you misunderstood. Every we were just talking. This wasn't me reacting. This was me executing decisions I'd already made. Lauren looked up at me with a new expression. Less pleading, more survival. Like she finally understood that whatever power she'd been holding over the situation was gone. I was going to tell you, she said, voice shaking. I didn't even blink. No, you weren't. Her eyes dropped back to the pages. The room went quiet except for the small sounds of paper shifting under her fingers. That's when she stopped denying the affair and started trying to manage the fallout. Ethan, please, she said softly. What do you want? I leaned back in the chair and held her gaze. I want you to understand something, I said. This isn't a conversation. It's a conclusion. She swallowed hard. The tears came again, but they weren't for what she did. They were for what it was going to cost her. She thought the divorce was the threat, like it was the headline that would scare me back into negotiating. She didn't understand that divorce was just the paperwork. The real consequences were already in motion. Lauren sat at the table staring at the packet like it could change shape if she stared hard enough. Her voice came out small. Ethan, we can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can. I cut it off without raising my tone. No, that word again. Simple. Final. She wiped her face with the back of her hand like she was embarrassed to be seen crying. Then what are you going to do? Just throw everything away? I leaned forward slightly, not to intimidate her, just to make sure she heard every syllable. You already threw it away, I said. I'm just cleaning up what you wrecked. She opened her mouth, then shut it, waiting for me to soften, for me to start bargaining, for me to reach for the version of us that had already been dead for months. I didn't. I slid a second folder across the table. Thinner, cleaner, no photos, just numbers, account printouts, and a couple of forms. Her eyes narrowed, cautious. What is that? The part you didn't plan for, I said. She flipped it open and her face changed. Confusion first, then a quick, sharp flicker of panic. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I just explained it like a man explaining a job he already finished. I separated my direct deposit, I said. I moved what's mine where it can't be touched without my signature. I locked down the joint accounts. I pulled credit reports. I documented spending. Her head snapped up. When did you do that? When I stopped pretending, I said. She looked back down, scanning, and I could see the math happening in her head. The comfort she'd assumed would stay, no matter what she did, was suddenly unstable. This wasn't going to be a messy tug-of-war where she emptied accounts in a panic and told everyone I'd blindsided her. This wasn't going to be her playing victim while quietly draining the life out of me on the way out. I wasn't there to punish her. I was there to protect myself. Lauren's voice rose for the first time. Not into anger, but into fear. You can't do that. I met her eyes. I already did. She stared at me like she didn't recognize me. That was fine. The man she recognized was the one who'd been trying to hold the marriage together alone. The one who kept explaining the distance. The one who still believed loyalty mattered to both people. That man was gone. Her breathing got shallow. Ethan, please. This is too much. You're being cold. I nodded once, almost like I agreed. Yeah, I said, because warm is how I got played. She flinched like I'd slapped her. Not because it was cruel, but because it was true. For a second, the room was silent except for her shaky breaths. Then she whispered, "So that's it? You're just done with me?" I looked at her, really looked, at the tears, the fear, the unraveling, and I felt nothing that could be turned into a discussion. "That's it," I said. Her shock deepened into something close to terror, because she finally understood the divorce wasn't just emotional loss. It was the collapse of the comfort and stability she assumed would remain hers no matter what she did. She gambled our life, and she lost. She stayed at the table after that, hands on the folder like it was the only solid thing left in her world. Her eyes kept moving, papers to me to papers, like she was searching for a version of this where she still had leverage. There wasn't one. I stood up without drama. No chair scrape to make a point. No last speech. The time for speeches had ended the moment she stopped coming home like my wife. Lauren's voice cracked behind me. "Ethan, where are you going?" I didn't answer right away. Not to hurt her, because I was done using words to build bridges she kept lighting on fire. I grabbed my keys off the counter. Wallet, phone, the basics. I wasn't moving out in the cinematic sense. I was stepping away from a contaminated space. "Out," I said. She hurried around the table, trying to cut me off before I reached the door. Not aggressive, desperate. "Please," she said, standing too close, eyes swollen. "Just stay tonight. We can talk tomorrow. You can't just leave me like this. Leave her like this." That line almost made me laugh, but I didn't. I just looked at her and let her hear herself. "You weren't thinking about me when you were with him," I said. "Don't start acting like I owe you comfort now." Her face tightened. "Derek doesn't mean anything. He was. Stop," I said, and it came out quiet but absolute. She stopped, like her body recognized a tone it couldn't push past. I opened the door. Cold air hit my face. Clean. Honest. Behind me, she said my name again, softer, like a prayer. I didn't turn back, because closure isn't something you get from the person who broke you. Closure is what you give yourself when you stop needing them to understand. I drove with no dramatic soundtrack. No fists on the steering wheel. No wild swerving. Just the road and the hum of the tires and that strange calm settling deeper into my bones. It didn't feel like victory. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like a final acceptance. The marriage ended before the divorce papers ever existed. I'd just been the last one to admit it. At a red light, my phone buzzed. A message from Lauren. Then another. Then a call. I didn't answer. A few minutes later, the phone buzzed again. A different number. Derek. That told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't gone because he suddenly grew a conscience. He was gone because consequences had entered the room, and men like him don't stay when the bill shows up. I kept driving. What her betrayal really took wasn't just trust. It was an identity, the future I pictured, the quiet assumption that home meant safe. But it also gave me something back, clarity. No more begging for warmth. No more swallowing doubt. No more living with a woman who could look me in the eyes and keep a second life running behind them. By the time I pulled into a quiet parking lot and shut the engine off, I sat there for a moment with my hands resting on the wheel. No shaking, no tears, just a long breath that felt like the first real air I'd had in months. Then I got out of the truck and walked forward, because staying in that emotional space would only reopen wounds that can't be repaired. And because a man who stops needing closure finally gets free.
Subscribe and stay one step ahead of cheaters. And trust me, the next story makes this one look like a fairy tale.